I'd like to introduce to you two staff here at Watershed Management Group, Catlow, Shipek, our Policy and Technical Director, also my husband. We are co-founders of WMG, and we get to spend a lot of time together, especially now that we're working at home together. And Joaquin Murrieta, who is our cultural ecologist and has been really a pleasure to work with here at WMG over the last 7 years. So I believe we're going to start with Joaquin. And Joaquin, what has been your experience with rivers here in Tucson? What's the story of rivers for you here in Tucson?
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Catlow, and thank you everybody for being here on this Tuesday afternoon, I believe. There are several stories in relation to rivers here in Tucson, and anywhere between Sabino Creek, between Santa Cruz River, Pantano Wash, and Rillito River. I remember the first time I joined the University of Arizona, I was working on Campbell and Roger, and that's when we had a big flood event in 1990, something like that. So to see the Rillito River from bank to bank creating huge waves, it was an amazing scene for me. Just, oh my God, look at that force. Look at that wonderful water flowing. My question was if that water actually made it to the Colorado River at that time. So from that, also there are some other very interesting rivers in the Sonoran Desert that have a huge attachment personally. Of course, the Santa Cruz River, the Colorado River, the San Pedro, and the Sonoran River. That's where I grew up in Sonora, Mexico. But coming back here to Tucson, it's a great story on the Santa Cruz River and the tributaries. So I will actually love to share a story of the Santa Cruz River and what is my current attachment to it. There is different ways to connect to the river, and it can be from nostalgic, from the past, from the present, but also from the future. So it's very nice to see all that wave of feelings, wave of emotions, same as the river flowing. That's kind of the way I like to think about that. And just to give you a little bit of perspective, this is here to the left. This is the watershed, the greater portion of the watershed of the Santa Cruz River. The Santa Cruz River starts in Arizona, in the San Rafael Valley, right where that red dot is moving. And there is some very interesting ranchers, a lot of very nice history. There is a movie that was filming there. The movie of that, the name of that movie is Kansas. And it was filmed there because the wonderful grasslands that we have right there in San Rafael Valley that imitate the prairies of Kansas, of Iowa, of Nebraska before the Corn Belt was built. But it was funny that it was filmed here in Arizona because of the healthy grasslands that we have. So that's the origins of that wonderful river, the Santa Cruz River, right in here. So check that movie, Kansas. So this river goes into Mexico right in here. Loquil is the name of the town. And then it enters Sonora. But if you go like 3 to 4 million years ago, that river used to go south, actually, all the way to the Sea of Cortez. Only 3 million years ago. Little by little, same as the Catalinas, some mountains start appearing here in the bottom. That's the Los Picos, they call them down there, the peaks. And that's why the Santa Cruz River makes a bend. And it comes back to flow north, which is kind of unique for rivers to flow north, same as the San Pedro. And it follows, it's funny for me to say, it follows Highway 19 and passes through Tucson, Marana, and eventually gets into the Gila River. So the picture that you're seeing here on the top right, that is San Lázaro, right in here. So the river over there, still alive, with beautiful meandering water, great stands of cottonwoods, some small scale farming. So imagine this image used to be also right here in Tucson, and we'll get to that. And here at the bottom is Tucson 2 years ago on a monsoon rain, right? Same river, different conditions. So for me, it's very interesting to see the river in different sectors, in different segments. And each segment tells a very interesting story and attachment of us humans into these watershed tributaries and rivers. So having that, this is still the Santa Cruz River in 1942. So let's go back 47, 50 years back and look at the stands of mesquites that we can see here. Way in the back is the Santa Rita Mountains, all right? So I always like to ask, how many trees can a river plant? And can we do that, we humans? Yes, we can. It will take a lot of effort, but plus the river, if it flows, oh my God, imagine all the life that can produce. So that's a wonderful image, 1942. It captured my attention this morning, this tiny little saguaro that is there. Look what happened in the next picture. Boom. Saguaro is gone, but there is another one here. And remember, for a saguaro to put the first branch, arm, it takes anywhere between 60 to 80 years. All right, so maybe this saguaro was hidden somewhere in there, but it appears there. And the little guy that was here, it has disappeared. So interesting changes, but the biggest change, where is 1989 now? Where are all the mesquite trees? What happened to them? Where do they go? Did we use those mesquites? There is a great segue of somebody that he was walking around here, taking notes, scientific notes. I'm forgetting the name. If you remember that name, Lisa, it's a great quote that he was measuring mesquites up to 60 feet in height and 3 feet in diameter of the trunk. And that's a huge mesquite tree. From that to this in 50 years, all right? So,
I have a question for you.
yes.
Other than mesquite trees, do you know what other trees were found in that riparian forest historically?
There are some wonderful stands, and there are better pictures to show that. But the trees, the bigger trees that you're going to see on a riparian corridor, closer to the river, is anywhere between desert willows, cottonwoods, other species of willows that flow together with the river. I mean, they are right there at the banks of the river. And the mesquite is a little farther away from the stem of the river. But what you're going to see closer to the river are cottonwoods and willows, for sure. Mm-hmm. Like something like this. All these continue to be mesquites, but I love this picture, 1919. This is a mountain right here, Sentinel Peak. But look, all this wonderful. Remember of the little picture of San Lázaro. This reminds me of that. Small scale farming right here, but all this flooding zone that we used to have along the Santa Cruz River. Right here in Tucson. I am going to take, I don't know if some of you ever been on Desert Survivors, the nursery. That nursery is somewhere in here, all right? But this is 1919 picture, okay? Just to give you a perspective. What happened then? Well, the farms are gone. Whoa, how do we jump all the way there? Oh my God, we went all the way to the end. All right, that's where, stop it. Okay, I'm going to stop in this picture because
Joaquin,
of that.
Joaquin, you can take a minute to get back to where you were because there was a question, so I can address the question while you're finding your way back.
I think that's where I was, yes.
Okay. The question was, is there any information on the months of the year that these pictures were taken? And probably is the answer. We'd have to go back. I definitely have noticed that some of these before and after photos were taken at different times of the year. So you can see some where there's leaves on the trees and then others where there's not. But we got all these photos from, or a lot of these photos from the USGS. So we'd have to go back and look at the records of the dates, but I'm sure that the photos have the month that were taken, but definitely these were not all taken in the same season. That would have been nice, but they weren't that consistent, unfortunately.
Right, yeah. And again, I mean, that change, the floodplain has changed. There are some buildings in there. There are some roads, new bridges. And this is what I was trying to say. Desert Survivors is somewhere in there. The outflow of the heritage area where the water is coming out, it's right in here, okay? So just to give you a perspective of the geography where we are dealing right now. So major changes, interesting dynamics. The river's still there, but it's way below us, all right? And since the river is below us, some of the trees that are closer to the river, of course, have disappeared. Like these cottonwoods that we see here on Martinez Hill in the San Javier district. These are cottonwoods. Those are the trees that you're going to see on a meandering, on a river with surface water, all right, together with the willow trees. But look at the stance of these wonderful cottonwoods right in here. Imagine all that life that those trees bring to the river, bring to the environment, and the diversity, the dynamism that nature actually creates along rivers. Again, 1940, and this place is very unique to the river at the present, very unique to some of us, because it has come back to life because of restoration. Again, some changes on that particular spot. New highways, new ways of managing flows, of managing rain. Not necessarily that is a good one, but that represent the changes on our riverbeds right here in the Santa Cruz flow. Again, for me, the fascination of the Mesquite Bosque, it's just an incredible scene. This is on top of Martinez Hill. Martinez Hill is it east of Highway 19, right there on the bridge of the Santa Cruz River. Whenever you go south into Nogales or Green Valley, you're going to pass that. So if you go and climb that hill in 1913, this is the Mesquite Bosque that you were going to see, all right? This is the little Santa Cruz River right in there. And the Santa Ritas, again, they're way in the back over there. How many thousands of trees are there? I think I will ask that question together with the months of the year, because I'm curious. Probably we'll be able to, from that picture, we'll be able to look into the density of mesquites in that area. That would be interesting to know, to see the density of trees, and if we can represent some of that into the present. Same area, 2002. And again, tremendous changes. And when I was looking at this picture, yes, the mesquite trees are not there, but way in the back there, I don't know if you ever visit the pecan farms that are somewhere in Green Valley there. It's a huge stance of trees as well, but it's totally introduced trees, that those trees absorb so much water into the mesquites. So it was interesting analogies between different trees, different species, different ways of utilizing the river and the impacts of that. And this is the most iconic picture. Probably you've seen this picture of the Santa Cruz River. I like to say that, yes, this is the origins of Tucson. This is Black Mountain again, A Mountain, Sentinel Peak. This is the Santa Cruz River right in here. And right here, I'm going to take a bet here that this could be anywhere between November and probably February when they took this picture, because these are cottonwoods in here. And my representation of cottonwoods there, it looks just like the branches. It looks like they don't have leaves. So maybe it's in the fall or in the winter when they took this picture. I'm guessing here, 1904, Santa Cruz River. And then we have wonderful stands of mesquites right in here. I have to say that Tucson has the name of Tucson because this picture, all right? The meaning of Tucson is at the base of Black Mountain. Black Mountain being a mountain and the base being the Santa Cruz River. In conversations with other Tohono O'odham friends and people that we have worked with, some of them add water into that meaning. And of course, I like that. And so is the body of water underneath the Black Mountain. But the official translation is that underneath the Black Mountain. But look at the river, look at the mountain, look at the cottonwoods, and look at these mesquites that are in here. Then of course, the aliens came, like in here, and they sucked all the water. And that's why the Santa Cruz River dry. That is not true. No aliens came. We are the ones that are using all that water. I wanna guess, and I'm not sure this is a water tower that is in front of Elkhorn Mall still, but I'm not sure of that. And I'm always asking if somebody knows what is that tower. It looks like the Elkhorn Mall water tower in that image. So origins of Tucson right here, wonderful meaning for a tiny little short word. And what happened by 2000? Oh my God, where did the river go? Where did the cottonwoods go? So as the river goes down, the water of course goes down, the water table. So the cottonwoods roots are standing just earth without touching the water. So those are the first ones to go. Those are the first ones to die. They start looking sick, they don't come back next season, and eventually with a flood, they fall down and they just disappear, all right? Unfortunately, I have seen images like that here in the US, in Mexico, of cottonwood stands like that the water table keeps going down and suddenly the roots are not touching the water. And that's the first sign of sick cottonwoods because they're not healthy, they're not touching the water. They do require that water. So it took us around 80 years to create this impact on this wonderful river, all right? And this is again,
real quick before you transition. Well, one, can you adjust your monitor so we can see your top of your head's cut off a little bit? We want to see your face. That's better. Yeah. Also, Logan. Now
because I didn't my hair today.
Logan Phillips said, "I've been told that the tower is a mill since torn down." So,
okay. A mill.
Information.
I'll check that out. I'll look what mill was that. Okay, thank you for that information. The water tower is still there in front of Elkhorn Mall, but I have no idea when was that. So a mountain, Sentinel Peak again, but look at the bed of the Santa Cruz River. It's kind of a natural looking riverbed. Yes, there is no water flowing at that time, but look at the banks of the river. These were the banks of the Santa Cruz River at that time. We still have some cottonwoods in there, 1958. What that is telling us is that the water table still somewhere in there between 0 to 30, 50 feet below us, all right? So cottonwoods require that. But in addition to that is a bunch of mesquites in here. So this is kind of the natural look of the river bank, the riverbed around that time in 1958. By 2001, I think this the soil cement banks that we developed for the Santa Cruz River, they have one objective: to take the water, or to protect the city from flooding and take the water away from the city. And those were starting to be built in the, correct me, Catlow, if I'm wrong, in the early 1990s. All right. And those banks, all of us are familiar with them. They're anywhere between the Santa Cruz, the Rillito River, Tanque Verde in some areas. We got really good at creating banks like this with the objective of protecting the city against flooding events. All right. With that comes other implications. There are always implications when we're working with the dynamism of a river.
Joaquin, there was a comment/question. If these were installed after that big 1986 flood, so maybe speaking to a little bit about why we have, why has the county put in these bank stabilization?
Precisely for that, for protection of flooding for the city, all right? Because there are some huge surges of water, and the city keeps growing, water table keeps going down, the river keeps changing. So we wanted to manage the flows of the river better. So the banks were stabilized with the idea so the water doesn't get out of the banks of the river with that soil cement.
And Joaquin, can you, and/or Catlow, if you want to jump in, just talk a little bit about that, because I think there's a lot, Catlow shaking his head. I think maybe there's not a lot of understanding about why we have bank stabilization, or what that means. So a term you might hear is that the floodplain has been disconnected from the river. So what does that mean for the floodplain to be disconnected from the river?
Remember that picture that we saw on the floodplain with the little farms right here in Tucson? What happened when we have a big surge of water, big rain, like we sometimes have? So the river opens up, all right? That's the importance of the floodplain. It opens up. The energy of one stem of the river is just spread in a huge piece of geography. That happens if we don't have the bank stabilization. River opens up, energy diminish, and river keeps flowing. If we stabilize those banks, we have a lot of water in one little piece of geography. It's like a funnel, all right? So that funnel is taking the water really quick, really fast, and it never make it to the floodplain because the banks of the river, right? So the energy is funneled between those two banks, and the water gets away from the city a lot faster than if we have the floodplains in place. Hopefully I'm making sense with that. And like in here, and the river does that naturally. We have some banks here, but this is the natural banks of the river, all right? 1958, we have a bank of the river right here, no soil cement, that's the natural channel of this river. Some cottonwoods in here, but look at the different dynamics here of elevation that the river is creating, the river is forming, all right? So right now anyway, I'm going to stop that. I really like this picture because it shows that. It shows the natural banks of the river. It shows some river flowing right here in the Santa Cruz River. And now this thing doesn't want to move. Oh, it did move. Same image, but look at the big change on the bank stabilization. I don't want to talk more about banks. This is 1915 along Congress Street. And that's what I'm trying to say. Look at the openness of this floodplain on this river. All that energy is dissipated along all this geography, all right? Try to put that in a funnel, and how big of a funnel you need, and how high of a bank do you need to take all that energy? That's a lot of energy of water, actually. And people, there's people there actually. These are little heads that you can see there. So it's very nice to see these huge events. Same area by 2008. So the different connections to the river, these remind me of where I grew up in Sonora. This is the Tanque Verde, 1940. Again, beautiful stands of cottonwoods, beautiful stands of willows, and beautiful people coming to take sand out of the Tanque Verde. I know that because this is the tires of a truck, most likely. And they were grabbing some sand, maybe to some construction or something like that. Same as in here, trucks coming in, taking sand, who knows for what. But these are interesting elements of a society of Tucson, coming to creeks, using the sand, using the sediment that comes from the Santa Rita, from the rincons. But what is to notice here is the wonderful stands of the cottonwoods right here in Tanque Verde Creek, close to Sabino Canyon. Time passed, and this is the implications that we have. So a lot of things happen in these images between the banks, between water tables, between different uses, between different access to these wonderful arroyos here in Tucson. Same creek, Tanque Verde Creek, with a flow in 1941 from bank to bank. That's a wonderful scene right there. So it's very interesting to see different dynamics, the different sectors of the river. So I didn't want to end with, yes, there is a lot of changes. There are always changes in the river. There's always a dynamic flow of things that happen to the river. The other day, talking with a friend of mine, that the river, Santa Cruz River in this case, and its tributaries used to provide a lot of life to Tucson. And it's interesting now that Highway 19 and Highway 10 that follows the Santa Cruz River, now they are the providers of life. It's kind of weird to think like that. I mean, a freeway following rivers, and they move things. So now we depend so much on those highways, but the river is still there. The river is still there with us and provide some elements or a lot of elements of life. I stay with three segments of the river, the Santa Cruz River and tributaries, that really gives me hope. This is the Santa Cruz River in Mexico, where we started in San Lázaro, all right? This is a natural river. This is a natural flow. Sometimes there are impacts of it with cattle, mismanagement of cattle. And that's why we've been working with ranchers of the Santa Cruz River to maintain the health of the river. This is Ventura Rivera, an ejidatario member, a rancher in Santa Cruz. And with him, we develop all kinds of strategies for river restoration. So it's very nice to see ranchers working for restoration, for conservation, in the health of the river. So I'm staying with that image for me, for the Santa Cruz River, and coming back here to Tucson, another segment of the river that provides so much hope and so much enthusiasm is right there in the San Javier district, in the San Javier Tohono O'odham Nation. This site is sacred. This site is a restored component. I'm very, very happy to see that some kids from San Lázaro came and participated planting these cottonwoods in early 2000. So it's very nice to see that the community of the Santa Cruz River is collaborating binationally, is collaborating multiculturally. So it's very interesting to see that the river actually brings us together. So for me, it has a lot of personal connection, this segment of the river. And also what is going on right now in the Tanque Verde section, together with some other creeks here in Tucson, working with the community, working with all of you, with the River Run Network. It brings us hope to bring some elements of life into these currents, into these flows of Tucson. Yes, there are flows sometimes in the Tanque Verde, depending on the water table. And sometimes there are no flows, all right? Because of the water table fluctuates as well. So we're working with that rhythm of water tables and surface. But the hope is right here. Look at that cottonwood right there. That brings a lot of hope. That is telling us that that tree at some point still connected to the water table. And that's a wonderful scene, all right? Actually, we excavated one time in there and we found the water in 2 feet deep. 2 feet. That was beautiful to excavate, and our kids got so excited to see the water right there with a couple of shovels in depth. The other very,
Joaquin, we have a question, and actually this is a good photo, maybe back on the Santa Cruz. I think, and I would like to have Joaquin, if you could answer this, but also Catlow, I think you might have some insight on this question. Really good question from Sam Mendeville. All the pictures of the Santa Cruz flows from the years past, would that flow have come from snow in the Santa Ritas? So where is that flow coming? The river was flowing in the late 1800s, early 1900s.
Right. The Santa Ritas is a very big, good provider of water to the Santa Cruz River. It's a huge mountain. It got snow. It gets some higher elevation. It gets additional rain, a lot more rain in Tucson. So in a good monsoon, those waters can make it to the river. All right. And also the snowpack of the Santa Ritas, together with the Catalinas, together with the Rincon, sometimes make it to the Santa Cruz. But remember that watershed image that we show anywhere from San Rafael. That river is the low spot of the watershed and is gathering water from the San Rafael all the way to Marana. Okay. So the other good segment that brings us hope right here downtown Tucson is different tools that we're using to bring some elements of life back to the Santa Cruz River. And this is an experiment, a project done with Tucson Water and partners, where we open a faucet, big faucet, and we're dumping around close to 2,000 gallons per minute to the river, all right? And that's why right now we have the Heritage Project. That's one tool. With using treated water to bring some life to the Santa Cruz River, all right? And right now it's flowing anywhere between 29th all the way to Congress. And so that's the amount of flow that it is bringing life. I think we were there, Trevor, Bogan, myself, 3-4 weeks ago, showing the different bugs, the different flying critters that are coming back because there is water in there, in addition to other elements of life. So it's very nice to see that Tucson Water and Pima County, other partners are also looking into the life of the Santa Cruz River. And another very, very important element of the work that I get attachment to it is we keep saying that we want to bring the tributaries and the Santa Cruz some elements of flow back. Yes, we do, and that will take some time, and that's part of Catlow's conversation next. And so we keep saying anywhere between, depending on where we're working, 40 to 50 years, we can have some elements of natural flow in those streams, all right? And talking like a human language, I mean, in Chicago, the Chicago Cubs waited about 100 years for that baseball team to win the World Series. 100 years for a World Series. Can we Tucsonians invest, work, celebrate 40, 50 years for the Santa Cruz and its tributaries to come back with flow. It's only 40 years. If we can wait 100 years for a baseball game, we can certainly do it for a river. So with that, the next slide, I cannot move it, Catlow. The next slide, it's just the investment that we're also doing on the younger generation, because they are the ones when they are my age. This one, I love this picture because that is Trevor here to the left of the image, and that's me working with a bunch of kids on restoration of an arroyo in Hermosa Montessori School. To see these kids creating media lunas, diminishing erosion, creating SUNY balls to infiltrate water, and they got so excited. Of course, they're working with rocks and they're outside the classroom, but it was fascinating to hear them talk about flowing rivers right here in Tucson. They're the ones that are going to be celebrating that. So they're already investing in that. So that's pretty nice to see. And maybe we're looking at maybe the future mayor, maybe the future director of TUSD is right there. So it's fascinating to see this younger generation already seeing in their mental image that rivers are actually going to flow right here in Tucson. And with that, I'm going to stop there and bring you back into the present future. And I want to ask Catlow and Lisa, actually, how do we started thinking about 50 years from now? I mean, this has been like 7 years or so, but what came into your head? What inspired you to think, okay, let's bring the flow back here into Tucson, into the Santa Cruz, into Sabino, into Tanque Verde? What was kind of the first drops of inspiration that brought us to where we are right now? Catlow.
Thanks, Joaquin. I like the the reference to kind of a lot of the cultural connections that are really important, and I'm just so excited that everybody's here tonight because it's really about, we're doing a lot of technological fixes, and I think the Santa Cruz River Heritage Project, some of the other recharge projects are points in progress, but it's going to take all of us having that connection to our rivers and embedding it in our culture for finding a new path forward. And so even though I'm the policy technical director, I get really deep into the details, I still have to remember that this is all about community connection. Just so thrilled with the work that's being done, not just with WMG, but kind of across the community. And this was kind of early infused in us. I mean, I grew up in Sierra Vista. Actually, I was more of a mountain person right at the base of the mountain, but the San Pedro River was flowing through that valley all during the time when I grew up. And I had very little connection to the river, but kind of knew that it was a dying river and saw some minimal efforts being applied to how do we save this river. And that was, I don't want to date myself, but that was decades ago. And so then Lisa and I got started and we're focused on watershed management group. We're trying to apply what we've learned in school. And we had this connection through somebody here in Tucson to work with this community in Costa Rica. And interestingly enough, this community was focused on facing how to save their river from dying due to increased pineapple cultivation and mismanagement, poor management of resources. And so kind of when we spent 3 months just volunteering, we were working with this nascent watershed group that was trying to get started in addressing these issues. And the first things was just helping community connect to ranchers, connect to farmers, think about and brainstorm solutions. I feel like we were more just helping to connect the dots in our time there, but it really showed the importance of having that power of community and that power of connection within the community. So fast forward, I come back, we start WMG, and lo and behold, here I am working again in the San Pedro. and helping to think through water resource management in the Sierra Vista area for how to save the San Pedro, and working with other partners and collaborators like Nature Conservancy, Cochise County, et cetera. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, finally some alarm bells are going off in people's heads, and like, how do we save this river from dying? And here I am now living in Tucson, and Tucson's full of dead rivers. And I'm like, you know, our river's already dead, but maybe we can save, preserve some other flowing rivers. But then I was sitting on Tucson Water's Community Water Advisory Committee, and heard this presentation in 2012 when Pima Association of Governments, Claire Zucker, was giving this presentation about this analysis they did on shallow groundwater area. Shallow groundwater area is being defined as where groundwater is within 50 feet of the land surface. So therefore it can support biological connection to support cottonwoods, support mesquite trees, that type of thing. And they had mapped and looked at all of these groundwater trends, pumping trends, riparian trends across these areas in Pima County. And it dawned on me, there are areas in the Tucson basin worth preserving, worth saving, and with the potential for restoration. It's not just that we have to look elsewhere for where those rivers are dying, but we can also look here in our own basin. So what's funny is I left this meeting and in the hallways, and I was just so excited, and I run into Tucson Water's then chief hydrologist. I'm like, this is so impressive. Like, how can we watershed management group help, you know, kind of make these connections and get people excited about it? He's like, you know, there's potential to restore the Santa Cruz River. There's potential to restore the Tanque Verde, which wasn't flowing at that time. There's potential to restore some of these other areas. We just have to apply and invest in the right resources and make the right management decisions from the landowner or the resident up to the utility level. And it just left me like, I think I remember biking as fast as I could back to the WMG office. I'm like, guess what I just heard? I think we have a chance to preserve, and not just preserve, but restore some of our dead rivers. And so then fast forward, that next year, we made it the focus of WMG staff retreat. We went up to the mountains. I'm a mountain person. I think best in the mountains. And I forget if it was Trevor or Joaquin, it just came up with, you know, there was some mantra, and I'm not good at remembering mantras. Maybe Lisa or Joaquin remembers, but we just got all of our staff excited for working on this. And so it kind of slowly started gaining steam, but again, I'm the policy and technical person. I don't like to put anything forward, and I think there's a, and so I had that glimmer of hope, but then I needed to think about, okay, is it actually feasible to be able to do this? So it took a few more years of planning and such, and realized, yes, it is feasible. And yes, systems are already being restored. And if we get through the River Run Network, work where it builds connections, builds community, builds relationships, and ultimately builds trust, then we can scale up that work to be so much greater. And so we came up with the 50-year vision. We knew that this, as Joaquin mentioned, this is a long-term endeavor. Some of these systems, you can simply dump effluent in a river and call it restored. Yeah, we're not quite calling it restored. We're saying that's a step in the restoration process. We can definitely do more. So we wanted to think long-term. We wanted to think beyond ourselves. What could we achieve as a community? And really establishing that vision. So then we can start to work with community members, collaborate with agencies, other NGOs for how we can all align and work in partnership together. So our 50-year vision is in 2070, I'm gonna be well retired, hoping I can still walk along the Rillito and the Santa Cruz. But these rivers and their tributaries are a cooling ribbon of green, which is so important. I mean, we had the hottest July, hottest August on record. I think the first 3 days of September broke records. So we need that cooling ribbon of green. And it needs to be not just for the environment, it needs to be for our culture, our livability, for a sustainable Tucson economy. how can we move away from having to always be transporting goods along our freeways and more thinking about what is a sustainable green economy for moving forward in this area. So we commissioned a local artist, Dennis Caldwell, to create our visions in these iconic parts of the watershed. You've seen these already probably. This is Craycroft, Craycroft Road, where the Tanque Verde, the Pantano come together to form the Rillito. We even put a little beaver dam. You know, there's always hope. Restore the water and the beaver will come, right? To then even, and this is the Paseo de las Iglesias reach, so essentially looking north from the San Javier district into downtown Tucson to the base of a mountains where Tucson, the birthplace of Tucson, and thinking of what is that opportunity for restoration and all of these different ribbons of green throughout our community. So as it's been highlighted, there are lots of points of progress, and it seems to be accelerating. I feel like once you start compounding these, it's a snowball effect, and it just builds faster and faster. And so we've seen just within the last few years, there's been a diminished pumping along Lower Sabino Creek, and we've seen groundwater response due to that. So we're seeing longer periods of sustained flow. We're seeing perennial flow where it's year-round. In sections of Sabino Creek. So that's super positive. We're seeing, and with the help of some of our flow monitors, we're seeing that the middle Tanque Verde Creek area, essentially along where the 49ers golf course is coming back to life. And just within the last few years, it started to flow intermittent or seasonally well into, I think, July or early August this year. And unfortunately, it's been such a dry summer, but maybe as you know, these efforts continue to build on each other, we're going to see more and more sections of river start to express where the groundwater can express itself surface flow and support these beautiful riparian systems. This is the area we were fortunate to have a tour by the San Javier district and their natural resource conservation staff last year, and this section's been flowing for the last year and a half. I actually walked out to the river where the point where groundwater was expressing itself and emerging from the bed of the channel becomes surface flow that works its way downstream for what is it now, a half mile to a mile in length of perennial flow, and it's been flowing for over a year and a half now. And this is all due to the work, vision that the San Javier district and their elders had decades ago is just now coming to fruition, not just the flow. So now it's that once you establish the flow, you can then start to restore the ecology. And this, I think, is the probably one of the catalyst events, is just the transfer, the change in management to allow effluent to flow down along the Santa Cruz River through downtown has just got a huge community outpour of support for wanting to see more of this. And so it's almost like a drug. You see a little bit and you get a little bit, you get a little taste, and you just want more and more. And I think it's a really exciting time for working on these efforts. So the call to action is to get you to review our abridged version of our strategic plan and look at, okay, where are we going? What do we think needs to happen? And look at us feedback of where do you see yourself fitting in? Do you have other suggestions? How can we grow this effort? And that's what we're kind of looking for. And I'm just going to give you a snapshot of what our next 50 years looks like as an organization. So we're going to be focused on community engagement. So renewing that pride in heritage of flowing rivers to grow a large populace through our River on Network program. This is something that I tend to work more on, is the watershed planning aspects. And so not just us doing our own watershed plan, but also looking at how do we engage agencies, other NGOs, and develop a basin-wide watershed plan that's in collaboration and coordination with all of these different players. And that's something that we're currently working on and hoping to release draft early next year. To then, of course, moving forward with on-the-ground restoration work. We've been doing a lot of this already through grants that we're bringing in, working with individual landowners, and working under contract through flood control, where they're buying floodplain land and that used to be developed, they're buying, and we're coming in and with volunteers helping to restore those floodplains and those connections. To then thinking about policy. I'm really excited. Tomorrow, Mayor and Council will be considering, unfortunately, it's an emergency climate, a climate emergency action. Unfortunately, it has to be an emergency, but thinking more actively, what are some of the other policies we can do? So starting to think about how do we shipment of our effluent and other water resources to stabilize and deal with these imbalances across our basin, to how do we preserve and restore more floodplain habitat. All of these are soft local policies that we directly influence through showing support and showing that we support these investments, to doing more green infrastructure, helping to cool and treat stormwater through our urban environment, to then investing in funding opportunities to support that as well. And ultimately, we're looking at how do we, if we're going to restore these systems, how do we ensure they maintain a level of preservation through the future? So that's called environmental flows. So thinking about how do we maintain and understand that the environment has its own right to access to water, and that then we have, once it has its own rights and has that access, then we are able to then manage what is remaining for our own community livability, and not the other way around. So we need to make sure that we're maintaining these systems. So the last thing, just to kind of cap everything off, is thinking about what are those benchmarks, those milestones that we're hoping to achieve. And so in the planning effort that I'm currently, my head buried in my computer for the last few months. So we're hoping that by next year, there will be a draft plan. We'll start to be able to review, provide feedback, and then by 2025, we should be already hitting the ground and moving forward with a lot of what's that plan encompasses. To environmental flows policy I mentioned, it may not be possible at the state level right now because of the difference in how groundwater and surface flows are regulated, but that doesn't mean, and there's examples of this across the country, across the world, of what I like to call voluntary disconnection from state or federal regulatory process, where we go above and beyond, and because we have this trust, we have these relationships, we're more innovative, more creative with how we're going to manage our water resources. And so then thinking about our ability to put effluent in the river, 10 years ago was a pipe dream. Tucson Water thought they needed every drop of that effluent, turn it for toilet to tap so we could then drink it, because demand just kept going up as population growth was. And so we've disconnected that. We've brought our own demand in Tucson down to 80 gallons per person per day currently. If we just have that, we can do so much more with our stored water. And then we can also now start to think about how can we benefit the regional system, the Colorado River. So we're not just restoring our watershed at the expense of another, but we can do both in parallel. You know, this is going to take a huge community. So we need everybody on board by 2050. And then 2060, looking at, you know, how's the perennial flows year-round are we looking to have in Sabino, Cienega, Tanque Verde River, to then ultimately, and this is the biggest dream, and I'm really excited, the San Javier district's already been thinking about this, is thinking about restoration of that mesquite bosque, 8 square miles of mesquite bosque restored south of Martinez Hill. Just imagine going back up, taking a photo, and comparing that to the 1890s photo, to the 1980s photo, and now a 2070s photo where that mesquite bosque is restored. That would be beautiful.